Despite its exceptional nutrient density, Moringa Oleifera remains a niche player in a global dietary supplement market projected to exceed $200 billion by the end of the decade. Its absence from the mainstream grocery aisle isn't a mystery of nature, but a complex result of logistics, taste profiles, lack of supply chain standardization, and regulatory hurdles that often sideline local food systems in favor of global commodities. Deep within the records of nature's forbidden cache sits a plant that exemplifies the gap between biological potential and economic reality, the Moringa Oleifera. In the semi-arid regions of South Asia and across the sub-Saharan African belt, this tree is a staple of traditional landscapes. Yet, to the global agricultural machinery, it has historically been viewed as a marginal species, rarely receiving the same research investment or infrastructure as major export crops. The story of Moringa's exclusion is not a simple conspiracy, but a byproduct of economic priorities. During the colonial era, agricultural programs were heavily tilted toward cash crops designed for export: cotton, tea, sugar, and tobacco. These were the engines of imperial revenue. Local food plants like moringa, which grew in backyards and along fence lines, were rarely integrated into formal agrarian policies. This led to a bifurcated system. While the world focused on perfecting the yield of a few monocultures, a vast library of nutritional knowledge was left to survive in the informal margins of rural life. Biologically, the plant is a masterpiece of resilience. Under optimal warm conditions and with sufficient moisture, moringa can grow at a staggering rate, sometimes reaching up to 3 meters in a single year. It is a survivor, adapted to thrive in soils where more delicate, commercialized crops would fail. But its true value lies in its chemical composition, which serves as a vital tool in nutrition programs rather than a magical cure-all. When looking at the nutrient profile, context is everything. It is often claimed that moringa is a superfood, but the reality depends on the form of the product. Dried leaf powder is a highly concentrated source of micronutrients. Per 100 grams, this powder is an exceptional source of vitamins and minerals compared to many fresh vegetables, precisely because the water has been removed. It is a significant source of provitamin A, beta-carotene, which is crucial for preventing vitamin A deficiency. In regions where diet-related xerophthalmia, a leading cause of preventable blindness in children, is a risk, increasing the intake of moringa leaves provides a bioavailable way to support ocular health and immune function. However, the complete protein label requires a nuanced understanding. While moringa leaves do contain all 9 essential amino acids, including lysine, methionine, and tryptophan, it is important to recognize its role in a balanced diet. Moringa is typically a supplemental protein source, a powerful fortifier for starchy diets, rather than a direct replacement for bulk protein like legumes or meat. Its value lies in its ability to fill the gaps in micronutrition where they are most needed. Perhaps its most fascinating biological technology is found in its seeds. Moringa seeds contain specific cationic proteins that act as natural coagulants. In a laboratory setting, these proteins can cause suspended particles, silt, and a significant portion of bacteria to clump together and settle at the bottom of a container. This process of flocculation can dramatically reduce the turbidity of water, making it look clearer and reducing the initial microbial load. However, it is a dangerous myth to suggest this makes any water drinkable on its own. While it is a valuable first step in water treatment in resource-poor settings, it does not guarantee total safety. Further steps like filtration, boiling, or chemical disinfection remain mandatory to prevent waterborne diseases. Historically, the marginalization of moringa was further cemented by social labels. In many regions, plants that were not part of the commercial economy were branded as famine foods. This term was often born from social associations rather than nutritional reality. If a plant was eaten primarily by the poor, or, during times of crop failure, it carried a stigma that deterred its use in modern diets. This cultural bias, combined with the fact that scientific priorities tend to follow the largest markets and the most significant funding streams, ensured that moringa remained under-researched for much of the 20th century. It wasn't a cold, calculated effort to erase the plant, but rather the cold, mechanical indifference of a global market that values standardization over local diversity. Moringa has spent decades in the forbidden cache of traditional knowledge, waiting for a world that is finally beginning to realize that nutritional security cannot be built on a handful of global crops alone. The mid-20th century marked a pivotal transformation in the history of global agriculture, a period widely recognized as the Green Revolution. This era was defined by a massive, synchronized effort to increase the yields of a select group of staple crops, primarily wheat, rice, and maize. Through the introduction of high-yielding varieties, expanded irrigation, and the systematic use of synthetic fertilizers and pesticides, the global food system achieved unprecedented levels of caloric production. However, this focus on a few key staples led to a structural shift in agricultural priorities, leaving many traditional and multi-purpose species, such as Moringa Oleifera, in a state of relative neglect within formal research and extension programs. As the global food infrastructure modernized, the technologies promoted by international institutions and private corporations favored agricultural systems that relied heavily on purchased inputs. The model was built for scale and uniformity. Improved seeds required specific chemical fertilizers and pesticides to reach their peak potential. In this economic landscape, a plant like moringa, which requires minimal external inputs and can thrive in marginal environments without a standardized commercial package, simply did not fit the prevailing business models. Consequently, investment in the infrastructure for moringa, processing, standardization, and global supply chains remained stagnant, while staples received billions in funding and institutional support. This period saw the rapid expansion of monoculture systems, which prioritized efficiency and yield above all else. Large-scale farming operations often led to a reduction in on-farm tree diversity. As landscapes were cleared to make room for vast rows of wheat or soy, many non-commercial species that had traditionally provided nutritional diversity were marginalized. These modern crops were optimized for yield, transportability, and uniformity, essential traits for a globalized market. But this optimization often came at the expense of micronutrient diversity. While the world successfully increased its caloric output, the Green Revolution unintentionally shifted the human diet away from the dense, diverse nutrients found in plants like moringa toward a narrower range of commodities. Despite its lack of integration into the global industrial chain, scientific interest in the bioactive compounds of moringa has grown steadily in recent decades. Laboratory and early clinical studies have begun to document the plant's unique chemical profile, particularly its concentration of isothiocyanates and quercetin. These compounds have demonstrated notable antioxidant and anti-inflammatory properties in controlled environments. While these findings are significant, researchers maintain that moringa is a nutritional supplement and a preventative resource rather than a direct substitute for medical treatment. The goal of modern science is now to understand how these natural compounds can complement modern health systems rather than outclass them. The resilience of moringa is perhaps its most compelling biological attribute in the current era. As climate change increases the frequency of extreme weather events, the plant's natural tolerance to heat and drought stress has renewed interest among agronomists. Unlike many commercial staples that require consistent moisture and precise conditions, moringa's deep root system and metabolic efficiency allow it to survive in environments that are becoming increasingly hostile to conventional agriculture. It serves as a biological insurance policy for food security in a changing world, thriving where more fragile systems are beginning to struggle. This relative neglect by the industrial system did not lead to the plant's disappearance, but rather its preservation in the informal, forbidden cache of local communities and small-scale farmers. As the limits of agricultural systems built around a narrow set of species become more apparent, the focus is slowly returning to these underutilized crops. The transition is not about a war between nature and industry, but a realization that long-term nutritional and climatic security requires a more diverse and resilient botanical portfolio. FOMO bite. The renewed scientific interest in underutilized crops like moringa highlights the limits of a global food system built around a dangerously narrow set of species. But as we look closer at the hidden ledger of nature, we are discovering that the most significant breakthroughs for our future may have been ignored for over a century. Stay tuned for the final chapter to see how the neglected survivor is moving from the margins of the field to the center of the global stage. In recent decades, rising rates of diet-related diseases and increasing climate stress have prompted a renewed and rigorous scientific scrutiny of global food systems. The era of focusing exclusively on caloric output is beginning to yield to a more complex understanding of nutritional density and ecological stability. Within this shift, the Moringa Oleifera has moved from the peripheral botanical blacklist of neglected species into a central subject of modern analytical research. This transition isn't a defeat of the industrial model, but a critical recognition of its limits, and an acknowledgement that long-term food security requires a more diversified botanical portfolio. Modern analytical methods have helped characterize the nutritional and phytochemical profile of moringa with unprecedented precision. Research attention has increased significantly, with laboratory and early clinical studies suggesting notable antioxidant and anti-inflammatory potential in the plant's leaves. Specifically, the presence of isothiocyanates and quercetin has drawn interest for their role in mitigating oxidative stress. However, the scientific community remains clear. While these compounds show promise in supporting health and preventing micronutrient deficiencies, they do not replace medical treatment. This is a shift in perspective, moving away from the miracle cure narrative toward a role as a potent tool in a broader nutritional strategy. The modern research paradigm is also evolving in how it views the delivery of these nutrients. While pharmaceutical research often focuses on isolating specific compounds for synthetic replication, nutrition science is increasingly studying whole food matrices. There is a growing understanding that the synergy between the vitamins, minerals, and phytochemicals within the moringa leaf may offer benefits that isolated supplements cannot match. This isn't a rejection of laboratory science, but a maturation of it. A realization that the complexity of a biologically efficient species, shaped by long-term ecological pressures, is a sophisticated technology in its own right. Crucially, as agronomists look closer at moringa's role in the ecosystem, they are correcting long-held misconceptions about its biology. It is a common myth that moringa works like a legume to biologically fix nitrogen in the soil. However, scientific data confirms that this is not the case. Moringa does not possess the symbiotic relationship with rhizobia bacteria required for nitrogen fixation. Instead, its contribution to soil health is mechanical and organic. Through its deep rooting system and the consistent contribution of organic matter via leaf litter, moringa improves soil structure and nutrient cycling. It is an example of evolutionary adaptation to harsh environments, thriving not by creating nitrogen, but by being exceptionally efficient with the resources available in the margins. This biological efficiency extends to the plant seeds and their role in water management. Seed-based flocculation, driven by specific cationic proteins, remains a fascinating area of study for reducing water turbidity. By causing silt and certain microorganisms to clump and settle, moringa seeds can significantly clear contaminated water. Yet, the scientific consensus is firm. This process alone does not guarantee potable water. It remains a valuable pre-treatment step that must be followed by filtration or disinfection to ensure safety. This nuanced understanding highlights the plant's role as a complement to, rather than a replacement for, essential infrastructure. International organizations such as the FAO, Food and Agriculture Organization, and the WHO, World Health Organization, have increasingly referenced moringa in discussions of dietary diversity and local nutrition strategies. It is no longer viewed as a famine food, but as a resilient, locally accessible resource that can support micronutrient intake in vulnerable populations. The integration of moringa into these global conversations reflects a broader shift toward diversified food systems, where the resilience of underutilized crops complements the strengths of modern agriculture. The story of moringa concludes not with an overthrow of the system, but with a necessary integration. The renewed interest in this species reflects a world that is learning to value biological diversity as a pillar of survival. As we move forward, the forbidden cache is being opened, not to replace the progress we have made, but to ensure that our future is built on a foundation of ecological resilience and nutritional density that can withstand the pressures of a changing planet. Moringa is proof that the most sophisticated technology is grown by nature, not manufactured. Subscribe to Ancient Roots Vault to unlock the next file from our forbidden archive. Stay resilient.